Alright, so with the Oscar nominations being announced about a week ago, Cate Blanchett's Tar gobbled up a handful of noms, and this isn't your typical dry drama. No, this wasn't marketed well at all, because this is a psychological drama, tense, cancel culture thriller. So we're going to be breaking this thing down for you, explaining the ending, some of its themes, and why the heck there's a ghost creeping on Lydia Tar. But with all of that out of the way, a huge thank you for clicking this. I'm your host, Jared. Now let's get into Tar. So Tar follows Cate Blanchett's Lydia Tar, essentially being at the top of her game, an accomplished composer, pianist, musicologist, and the first female chief conductor of the Berlin Philharmonic. We see her relishing in all of these accomplishments, being interviewed at the New Yorker Festival, promoting a handful of projects. Two noteworthy ones are her new book, Tar on Tar, which just screams that Obama awarding himself with a medal meme, and her upcoming live recording of Mahler's Fifth Symphony. However, with this level of fame and expertise, we soon learn Lydia may have a bit of a dark side or past to her. Sure, being a bit demanding when it comes to the do's and don'ts of the stuff involving her upcoming symphony, but very much badgers one of her BIPOC pan-gender students about their influences in composers, urging them to focus on their art rather than the transgressions they may or may not have committed in their personal lives. This, of course, is quite an on-the-nose concept for Lydia to suggest, because she too has a clouded past revolving around a past student of hers named Krista Taylor that she became romantically involved with. Krista was then blacklisted from all of these other orchestras by her after the two had a falling out. Lydia believes that her professional and personal lives should be separate, but can't help but mix the two, as the same series of events similar to what happened with Krista begin to happen with a young new Russian cellist named Olga. Manipulating the auditions, Lydia firmly plants Olga in the first chair position, granting her a solo in the symphony's companion piece. Alienating her relationship with Sharon, her wife and concert master of the orchestra, the alienation continues, though, as Lydia is informed via her assistant, Francesca, that Krista Taylor had ended her life, and her parents were attempting to sue Lydia after a number of alarming accusations against her came out. Lydia instructs Francesca to delete any email she has with Krista. She doesn't, instead quitting after failing to get the assistant conductor position that she was promised, and leaks the emails. A series of bad press is thrown Lydia's way as she has to deal with the Krista suit against her, then an edited out-of-context video of her berating the student from earlier with accusations of racism, protests against her during her book promotional tour, Shannon leaving her and not permitting Lydia to see their daughter, finally leading to Lydia being replaced as the conductor for the big upcoming Mahler's Fifth Symphony, making a huge scene tackling and assaulting her replacement the night of the performance, which was so reminiscent of the ending sequence from Whiplash. Like, so well done here. Now, advised to lay low after the events by her representation, the ending is a pretty big shocker, as it's revealed that Lydia's not from some prestigious line of rich, pretentious, elite composers, but rather returns to her childhood home on Staten Island, where her brother calls her by her real name, Lydia Tar, showing us that almost all of Lydia was fake it until you make it approach, a charade, if you will, forgetting her roots at the end of it all. Months later, in a complete change of scenery, as we see Lydia now living her life in the Philippines, a foreign land where no one knows who she is, essentially starting over again, symbolized by the Leonard Bernstein tape, What Does Music Mean?, that she watched back in her childhood room. This is supposed to be Lydia starting anew. However, her past ways may not entirely be washed away as she wanders into a high-end brothel looking for a massage. This ties back to her manipulative behavior and preying on younger women with Krista and Olga, as she eyes a young woman who is sitting in the exact same position as Olga was in the orchestra alignment and sports a number 5 on her robe, referring back to the Fifth Symphony that Lydia did not get to conduct. Ending the story in the most ironic, head-scratching scene of the entire movie is now seeing Lydia perform once again, but it is drastically different than the high-class, snooty, rich orchestra goers that we saw from earlier. No. These are cosplayers attending a Comic-Con-like convention for the Monster Hunter video game series as she conducts the orchestra in the same determined, serious manner, playing the theme song of the game ending the film. You're probably thinking, what the hell did I just watch? And believe me, there's a lot to unpack with this for sure. First of which is a look at the idea of power, corruption, abuse, leading us into the hashtag #MeToo movement of things. Lydia is essentially someone who gained such power in the musical world. Her influence alone gained her notoriety, from performances to even her book sales. But at what moment does that power become too much for one person and they start to manipulate things because they simply can? In an interview with Radio Times, director Todd Field explained, "I always knew where I'd started and where it would end, and I wanted to take a person and make them a vessel for having to hold power. And when does that vessel start to crack? And in what manner does the vessel go from being something on a pedestal and sort of literally worshipped to being stuck in the garage?" Though Tar is entirely a fictionalized character story, blah, 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 there are some serious similarities to celebrities and other powerful figureheads that fall right into the mold of Lydia Tar. From Cosby to Weinstein to Louis C.K., the list goes on and on and on. And with most of these cases, these people of power are torn down or, quote, canceled, and the film even shows the concept of cancel culture, but in a really clever way. Because yes, Lydia has lost her foothold in the prestigious musical world after being canceled. She's lost opportunities, relationships, fame. There are crowds of protesters for her book, and even legal trouble with the passing of Krista, mostly being blamed on Lydia. It's also pretty on the nose for her to be orchestrating for a game called Monster Hunter at the very end, when she was actually the monster of this entire story, being exposed and now seeing how far she's fallen from the prestigious world that she was so secure in. But also how cancel culture isn't necessarily a 100% foolproof plan. In many cases, the persona in question can lay low and come back without a single problem. Sure, they may have to reinvent themselves a bit, which Tar showcases in a very satirical way. For example, Lydia going back to her childhood roots, shifting to a different country, and conducting an orchestra for Monster Hunter. She is still putting her heart and soul and seriousness into the craft. As long as it sounds good, the Monster Hunter fans don't give two pumps who this person is. And hell, think about the real-life stories involving this same exact thing. How many of them were actually truly, quote, canceled? Louis C.K. did some heinous but literally just sold out Madison Square Garden. Like, why? How? This also brings up the concept Lydia Tar questioned her students about: can you, or rather should we, be able to separate the artist from the art? Someone's personal life and reputation, should it be in question when they release an absolute banger of a song, a movie, a painting, and so forth? In doing so, the culture of the time and place that art was created is then forgotten. Therefore, important material in the past wouldn't have the same cultural impact that it does in the present. This is actually kind of elaborated on during the opening New Yorker interview.
Shipibo Kanibo only receive an ikaro or song, and in that way the past and the present converge. It's the flip sides of the same cosmic coin.
And lastly, we gotta talk about what the hell these ghosts just creeping about mean.
I ain't afraid of no ghosts.
The first time I watched this, I honestly thought I was seeing things, but on two separate occasions, a mysterious figure can be seen in the background of Lydia's apartment, and once again when she wakes up in the middle of the night. There's also the scream in the park Lydia hears while on the jog, which, fun fact, this is the same scream from the Blair Witch Project. So these horror elements are to symbolize Lydia's past, specifically Krista, who was the young protege Lydia used and abused, eventually taking her own life. She is haunting Lydia. Krista's fate was actually teased by the book that she had gifted Lydia. A bit of a history lesson right now, but the novel is the challenge and was inspired by Vita Sackville-West's passionate love affair with Violet Trefesis in the early 1900s. The dedication page in Romani dialect translates to, "The book is yours, my witch. Read it and you will find your tormented soul changed and free." In the novel and in real life, Violet often threatened ending her own life if Vita left her. Lydia knows this, alluding to Krista eventually unaliving. The pattern scribbled in the novel is also a Shippable origin, which I'll touch on in a little bit, but it's Krista urging Lydia to come clean. Now, throughout most of the movie, Lydia never really thinks, dwells, even talks about the immoral things that she did to get where she's at now, and vice versa, what she's taken advantage of while in this position of power. All of this haunting is actually her conscience hallucinating these things to show her inner guilt, even though her outside persona that she built up doesn't physically want to approach these things head on. Almost acting like a robot, emotionless, making excuses for the other party's feelings. But these subtle hints are shown the 2 times we see the ghosts of Krista in the apartment, also when Lydia is constantly looking over her shoulder, feeling like someone's there, the scream in the park, the several times she can't sleep, blaming it on a handful of random noises in her apartment. Her coming back to reality and gripping the chair right as the New Yorker interview is happening. Even the dog she runs into when she's at Olga's place is just another image she hallucinates. A black dog is actually typically associated with the feeling of grief or sadness. Predators are typically haunted by what they do. So in Lydia's case, haunted and having a conscience are almost like one and the same, and the major turning point here is when she slams her head. It's almost like the predator is now turning into the prey as everything slowly unravels for Lydia. Surprisingly, right before the fall is the weird, dreamlike sequence of Lydia on her bed in the swamp with a snake swimming towards her. For the Shippable, serpents or snakes are entities that cleanse and purify their state of being and are commonly seen flowing within their visions. They're also sacred creatures, specifically the cosmic serpent of Ronan, and are considered the source of all patterns as they are laid out upon its skin. These various patterns show up several times throughout the film, commonly associated with Krista. For example, it's on her face in one of the visions and sketched out in the Challenger book that she gifted to Lydia. Anyway, Lydia bursts into flames, and this in actuality is the beginning of her attempting to atone for the sins of her past, and that's why there's this downfall of everything right after this event. So essentially, Lydia has to come clean. All of this was spelled out literally in the first scene of the movie via the live text message exchange on the phone, with one of the last messages being maybe. At the end, that maybe is still a maybe. Lydia gets sick after going into the brothel, being reminded of Olga by the position of the girl that she picks in relation to where Olga sat in the orchestra, along with the 5 being on the robe, associating back to the 5th Symphony that Lydia didn't get to conduct. But we never see if Lydia goes through with it or not. It is a maybe. But I think this also symbolizes her growing into her conscience and having more of a voice of reason because it physically causes a reaction. Whereas any other time in the movie, Lydia is stoic and non-reactionary. Anyway, that is Tar. There's so much to talk about. This movie, the more I think about it, the more it gets crazy. I'm pretty sure that there's even a teaser that ties in with the lore of this movie. But what did you think of Tar? What did you think of Blanchett's performance, the messages that it was trying to say, and did you catch those darn ghosts watching this movie the first time? And I'll let you know, we're currently running a competition right now, giving away 3 copies of Wakanda Forever on the 15th of February, and all you gotta do to get a chance of winning this is like this video, make sure to subscribe with notifications on, and drop a comment down below with your thoughts of Tar. We pick the comments at random at the end of every single month, and the winners of last month are on screen right now. So if that's you, message us on Twitter at Heavy Spoilers. If you want something else to watch, be sure to check out all of our other videos, Last of Us, tons of content over The Last of Us, you chumps. But with that out of the way, thanks for your constant support. I've been Jared. I'll see you in the next one. Take care and peace.